If you've been on Twitter long enough, you've seen these comics around. Are the infamous "You Are Not Special," "We Have to Kill This Guy Steven," or just the "Silly Naked Men," this creator is a heavy hitter in the online space. So in this video I interviewed him to better know the guy behind the comic, and get a better understanding of this House of Decline. Also, what it means to improve and truly get better at your craft. Hello, I'm Ryan, and let's dive on in. Alex is a 34-year-old artist from Toronto, Canada, and long before pursuing art, he was a child voice actor in the Canadian film scene, playing the likes of nerds like Kenny from Beyblade to even Brain from Arthur.
I got into it because my mom, she was a drama teacher. She knew people from the Montreal theater scene, and she knew people in the Canadian film industry, and she's, very quintessential classic Jewish stage mother. Oh, Alex, you're so talented. You're so good at performing. You should audition for these people. And she had some connection to a writer on a local television show, and I got some extra work there, and then I auditioned for an agent. And it's fun, you're a kid, right? I love TV, and I get to be on it. Are you kidding me? And so yeah, it's how it started, and I was lucky enough to get typecast as a nerd very frequently, so that helped me along.
However, this won't last too long, as he fell out of the love for the craft, essentially just as he got in. His acting career lasted between 1999 to 2007.
You gotta be okay with reading other people's words, including lines that you don't like, which sometimes I'd be reading lines that I don't like, and to be a real pro actor, you gotta do that. And so I was just not willing to commit to that. Also, just like, I don't know, like, some writer writes some, like, I can't remember any of the bad words that I had to say, and all of the shows that I were on were excellent. They had excellent writers. I'm not talking about any, but you read audition stuff, and you're like, I could write better than this. I mean, I think that's why I eventually went into comics creating, because I am a stupid writer. I like writing. I like making my own universe. I didn't want to read someone else's universe. I wanted to make my own universe,
During this time in college, when he was studying for his BA in music, he found a longtime collaborator, Steven. They had bonded over rock and roll during the time at school, and continued into their adult life with House of Decline in 2020. Originally, it was a collaborative multimedia project starting with the podcast and comics by Alex. And this is actually inspired by his time in college, doing radio, as Alex had a knack for it. During this time, Alex had pursued law school, as while he had aspirations for creating film music, he found a love for lo-fi that really wasn't going to pay the bills. But going back to House of Decline, his earliest comics on the platform were left as political drawings, ones that he really didn't have fun making.
Before I did the House of Decline series, out of COVID boredom, I was doing these terrible political cartoons, these terrible, like, left-wing political cartoons, and every stereotype of, like, a bad leftist political cartoon, they had too many words, they were too severe, like, it was clapter, I look back on them and they're like, these are not good. And I realized what was especially bad about them is because I wasn't being honest to what I actually found funny, or what jokes that I generated from my brain that were actually funny. Because I thought, in order to be funny politically, you have to have an original take, which means you have to read a lot. And I don't read a lot, so I couldn't come up with original takes. So I was just repeating stuff I heard on podcasts and, trying to formulate. So, not very original.
Over time, he found success with the platform, reaching over 168,000 followers on Twitter and over 25,000 on Instagram, respectively. He was kind of at the right place and right time with these comics, during the COVID pandemic, everyone inside, and him wanting to try something new. And so he found himself expressing his ideas with his pen.
The stuff that I was coming up with that was more honest to myself was just scatological bodily humor. That's what I found funny. The first comic in the series was, the reason why I did it is just because I'd quit my job. I went insane during COVID, and I quit my job, and I was just in an insane amount of unemployment depression. And so I just figured, I'll just do something. I was tweeting a lot. That's how I was seriously depressed, as I was tweeting so much, because it was, this is what's in my life now. This is what's in my life. I can make my little jokes online, and that's what I have. And one time I had a joke that I was like, this would be much better if I drew it out. And the joke was just a guy, it wasn't even a joke, it's just a visual gag of a guy putting his hand up two other guys' buttholes as boxing gloves, and then fighting another guy with boxing gloves, because it was easier to convey than in a text format. And then weirdly enough, it did like way better than any of my previous tweets, and not by much. It got like 40 likes, but I was like mining like 2 to 3 at that time. So I was like, maybe there's something to this. And I kept drawing jokes like that. After suppressing it for a while, I had always drawn cartoons as a kid, but had given it up because I thought it was childish. But now it was like I was just compulsively writing jokes, just kept compulsively writing cracking jokes in this state of like unemployment depression.
It was with these comics he filled a niche no one had delved into before. While there are a plethora of queer comics online, there was a surprising lack of slapstick body gags on the platform. Now, if you've been paying attention and not drawing, you can look up at the screen and notice that his art style is actually reminiscent of Keith Haring. You probably don't know the name of him on the top of your head, but you might be familiar with his funny dancing men. The sort of togetherness of these characters, mixing with simplistic shapes, caught the eye of Alex. There was a sort of humor within it that wasn't subjugated by the thought of hate, something Alex pursues with his own works. Now, while that was for the art style, the humor on the other hand was more so inspired by the daily comics and newspaper. If you don't remember what a newspaper is, it's basically like this whole big thing, a paper going like, oh, it's the news, but you throw all that out because you just wanted the comics inside. Remember those? Such comics that he liked would be Gone Wilson, George Harriman, even Sidney Smith. Really, any old comic that had goofy characters really charmed the young Alex.
But as a result, I work 7 days a week. I get up, I walk dog, I try and think of a cartoon, I try and do one of the detailed pieces if I don't have a commission that I'm doing. I'm now doing hyper detailed commissions that take me days at a time. I'm recording podcasts usually if I'm not booking that or doing some sort of, and if I'm not doing that, I'm doing freaking the most important part of the job, not the most important, but the part of why I gained traction to begin with, which is social media outreach, just replying on Twitter and doing stuff like that, and which I, do in my free time. It's not so much part of the job, but it's weirdly an important part of it as well. So thinking of new avenues to go, monetization, trying to produce, but that is good. It's like, I didn't have that before with my other jobs, this desire to really push myself. I have that now, and it feels right. I don't know, it's like people, I can do the grind now because it's something that is of moral importance to me.
However, not everything would be roses for Alex, as in early 2023, he would draw a now infamous comic that would become a pivotal point in his artistic career. And it's pivotal for me to tell you to like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't already. Thanks. March 19, 2023, Stevie PXYZ, a guy who is a separate Steven from who I mentioned before, posted a comic thread about his work, You Are Not Special, but Alex was the guy who drew it. The book. Within the thread, details a faux children's book written 12 years ago about how the main character, the reader, is not special. I mean, it's really just tongue-in-cheek and wasn't really meant to be taken seriously, but it was.
To this day, I don't think I've ever seen people with more quote tweets of hate than that comic got. That got over 20,000 quote tweets of people saying, this is garbage. I mean, part of the reason why we got in so much trouble was because he was an NFT guy, and people were like, you NFT clown, you don't like anything. And I was like, what can you do? He commissioned for me to do this illustrated children's book, or this fake children's book. And this was an old script. We had it since we had graduated from college, like in 2012. We'd come up with it, because it was around the time of that vogue of like, go the fuck to sleep, and all my friends are dead, and kids books that are really for adults, that's the gang, He wrote one called You Are Not Special, which is just, we don't actually believe that, but it's funny to say we thought it was funny to say the meanest possible thing to like a fake hypothetical child, which is that, Mr. Rogers says, you're special, right? And of course, the ending is, no, you're not. You aren't. Some people are, but you aren't. Extreme negative reaction to this. Very negative reaction to this comic. The criticism that I thought was fair was that, oh, this is like a Reddit joke from 10 years ago, or this is like that Maddox joke where he's being mean to kids' paintings or whatever, kids' drawings. He's giving F to kids. This is a very well-worn joke about. And on the, like, okay, this is a played-out joke or this is corny, I can accept that. That's fine. But then there was a whole other reaction to it, which was people accusing us of nihilism, which was, like, specifically nihilism. People were using the word nihilism. Like, this is an example of I mean, it wasn't really nihilistic. I sort of balk at that, because nihilism is, like, believing in nothing, and believing nothing has meaning, whereas the You Are Not Special was saying, no, things do have meaning, you're just not good at those things. So it was more like a pessimistic or miserabilistic than nihilist, or just a contrarian, or like snarky, or like or the frowning friends in Smiling Friends, which a lot of people posted frowning friends at us and then threatening to kill us while the frowning friends were pissing themselves. Steve received more death threats than I did, because I was very contrite, and previous to that I had built my social media following on being a little wholesome. We're a little sketchy, but we're a little wholesome as well. So I had already this following of people that, maybe weren't ready to receive this message. And I was trying to, I had never received this much negative reaction to anything. So I was flailing around and trying to do damage controls. Like, I thought it was funny. What are we going to? And then I apologized to the kids who were calling it nihilistic, because it's like, okay, I don't know what to do. Maybe this will get you off my back. And, I suppose I meant it, because I genuinely don't want anyone to feel bad when they read my cartoons. I genuinely don't want to make anyone upset. It seems like a lot of people were very genuinely upset at this cartoon. Steve, on the other hand, was reveling in it. He's more of like, he loves playing villain kayfabe. So he was just, engaging with people in a hostile way. Which was very funny. Which is also why he got more death threats than I did. I got one, which was, whatever. I don't care. It wasn't serious. I mean, I felt, I was very upset afterwards. I thought, are people going to hate me forever? And then I realized, no, it's fine. Just don't pour salt in it. Just don't pour salt in the wound. Just ignore it, and people will move on in 2 days, which they did. And the thing is, the book isn't bad. It's not like racist or sexist or anything. It's not like it only has like a retrograde moral view that I don't even genuinely believe in. So what's funny is
finish it. Yeah. Like the first page has like 53 million views, and the second one has 1.7 million, and so it's like people didn't fucking finish it.
No, I mean, I think it also came out at the height of the pandemic, and like people were insane as well. I guess it wasn't the height, it was just, but people were still made insane by the pandemic. We're still seeing the results of that, and I think just being inside and people, it was a lot of young people too, especially, that were saying that this is unapproachable nihilism. And I realized, there actually is a pretty big difference between the sense of humor of like the Gen X-y sort of humor that comic is derived from, and this sort of very, I don't know, Steven Universe-y, for lack of a better term, sense of humor that a certain pocket of Gen Z and Gen Alpha internet people have. Not that I love Steven Universe. I think Steven Universe is great, but and I think there's an absolute place for that more wholesome, sort of more like declarative type of humor. But it was funny. Ultimately, I can look back at it and laugh, because nothing bad happened. No one accused me of plagiarism. It's not like I had been plagiarizing a bunch of stuff or something like that. So, or my career was ruined because I kept doubling down or something like that.
In every comic artist's life, there's sort of a newfound hardship they must go through on the online space. One misinterpreted comic. One such previous example would be 2017's My Bike Got Stolen Recently by Shin Comics. It was just a nice little comic about Shin coming to terms about his bike being stolen, because you can report it to the police, but they're not gonna care. They're not gonna check that. Oh, we'll look for a stolen bike for you, I guess. And people took it the wrong way completely. I actually have 2 videos interviewing Shin about it, so go check out those after this one. Thanks. Circling back to creating bad works, often that might be the thing you'll be remembered for the most. In creating art, often a regular person would just see one post or piece by you, and just go on with that lasting image, not knowing it's rather just a faded memory, as you, the creator, just keeps moving forward. But to ruminate on those who try to remind you of your misdeeds often only is a method to bring you down. As if every bad comic out there are hundreds of nice ones that might take off. In fact, a month later, after You're Not Special, Alex released another infamous comic in the positive sense. It was about Steven Universe versus Hitler, of him trying to convince Hitler to stop being bad. It was only the final frame that left a lasting image in the viewer's minds to this day.
That one had unexpected legs. I didn't see that one becoming the phenomena, if I can say that, if that's not too braggadocious. But it was. There's so many of the edits. I can't believe how many of these things, that so much so that people don't know that it's from me, which is great. That's awesome. That was like one of my primary goals as a cartoonist on the internet, that gets out there and people just don't know where it's from, but it's just become so ubiquitous that everyone knows it by shorthand. That would be amazing. And so I feel like I've achieved a small amount of that with We're Gonna Have to Kill This Guy, Steven.
So for that little light at the end of the tunnel is that you should always keep on drawing, as letting 1 or 2 bad things bring you down would just do more bad than good for your mental health. Though in searching for the bad leads to another passion of Alex's: Horror. House of Decline is named as such, not just for the humor he likes to partake in, but also his fascination with the darker aspects of the human mind. Although he's known for his single comic works, he's also had his hand at short stories. Two of the shorter ones would be that of The Modular Man and The Serrated Knife. The first tells the story of a man who was touched art for intimacy, one day finding antique restoration videos. He had found a deep love for the idea of taking something apart, even wanted to take himself apart to be cleaned. The latter would be about a woman who craves a specific type of death, that of a serrated knife digging into her jugular. The thought of death would consume her, eventually leading to a physical yet imaginary manifestation for this creation. However, his magnum opus would be that of Together, a 240-page body horror comic.
I just had this idea for a while that I had always wanted to make as a movie, but I realized I am not social enough to make a movie. But the great thing about a comic is you can do it all by yourself. So I had all of these shots that I had been saving in my head for years and years. It was this desperate thing to be like, I'm aging, I'm past 30, I gotta do a graphic novel. I gotta, this like compulsive thing of like, and I have to get it out as quickly as possible. So that was sort of like a challenge to myself. Like, how fast can I write a graphic novel from stem to stern? And so I wasn't doing pencils for it. I was just, doing ink directly on the page, and which shows, it's a very rough looking book, but I think that's sort of to the style of it. Yeah, I just had this idea for a while of like a couple, they start molding into each other. I had loved body horror for a while. I love David Cronenberg movies, Toronto boy David Cronenberg. I love like medical horror. I always wanted to do a comic about, to me, like just the tenor of my life in my 20s and my 30s, out of high school and out of college, was just being jerked around by different systems. Just being in school and getting jerked around by like financial aid, or just being in a hospital and getting jerked around by some, you have to go to this specialist and then the insurance won't cover that,
It sounds like a lot of people were jerking you off back then.
A lot of jerking was going on. It's too much jerking. Too much jerking in my gherkin.
Too much.
I'm one man. I can't take it. I'm the cum cow. I am Ben Garrison's cum cow. Yeah, so I want to do a body horror comic about just systems, about you being powerless against systems and then eventually taking revenge against it. So that was the major idea. My personal desire for revenge against hospitals and the military and stuff like that, sort of motivating this fantasy. But also the gag that I wanted to do was, I always had this idea for a story, is like, usually when characters resolve their problems in a story, it also happens to coincide with the resolution of the plot. As a character becomes more well-adjusted, then they gain the mettle to do the thing to defeat the bad guy. Their emotional journey is reflected in the progression of the story. But I like the idea of, as characters gain more self-actualization within the story, everything gets worse. So as like the apocalypse scenario is, these people can't become self-actualized or the world will end, which I think is a very funny thing. That's another gag that I wanted to do with the story that I had sort of planned out from the beginning. But it was turning into winter at that time as well, so I was getting real naturally. Oh, I'm sad. I'm depressed now. Time to write horror. It's horror time. And I think that's it. It's what was coming naturally to my brain was horror. So if you're in the task, if you have given yourself the task of creating something every day, then you have to go with what you're thinking in the moment, because that will be the most natural and honest, and you will produce the best work as a result of that. So I think that, more than any reason, is why I did it.
For all the comics mentioned, you can of course go to the website to read them all for free. The concept of creating something successful can be a scary idea in of itself. The thought of what is next is always in the mind of every artist. For the likes of Alex, while he loves the support for singular comics, the longer form content was something he found a deeper passion for. However, with the algorithm that gains success, it doesn't always pivot to the same numbers for something that is more than one page long. So for goals, it's often a hard thing to really pinpoint. Rather, for Alex, he has a general idea of what he wants to do.
World domination, baby. No, but the goal is get better at cartoons, build the Patreon, sell more decent merch, by which I mean get self-published together, self-publish a book of my own the gag cartoons, assemble more comics. I have a mini comic called Serialization that could use a nice little zine. So that's basically like, this will be my year of actively getting off my butt and producing. Like, because that's the thing about merch, is like, I have this little Bill Watterson in my head who's always telling me, just do books, you idiot. People don't need plushies. They don't need shirts. Just do books. And so, yeah, I have to, because I have have
books
that.
And calendars. That's what he
Yeah,
does.
books and calendar. Yeah, those are the justifiable ones. At least the little Watterson yelling at me in my head. But yeah, the comics are taking off. Again, not to sound braggadocious, but it's very easy to. I'm in the algorithm somehow, at least on Twitter, at least temporarily. It's been like a couple of months of very good advertising and pretty fairly rapid Patreon growth, at least compared to what I'm used to. So yeah, hopefully within the year we'll be solvent and doing this really full time. And I have that. That's the goal, is basically make my living wage off of it this year, and then the rest of it's gravy.
Before we wrap up this video, I wanted to try something different. Usually I get my friend Valentine Bay VA to read comments after the interview, but this time I wanted to personally read them during the interview. So subscribe and turn on notifications, because whenever I make a community post, there's a chance it'll be read to the actual creator of the thing. To me, he's a guy that knows all the world's issues and understanding. He's only one man and can't fix them. He makes his own peace with it in his comics. And not gonna lie, I respect that a lot.
Oh, that's nice. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that was the other thing I was trying to do is like, I had just absorbed you got to be negative on the internet in order to get traction. And then I realized I was such a bad hater. I was so bad at being a hater. I just had no tact for it. But I was better at being a nice guy. And so there is a thread of positivity in the comics, a thread of hope, if you will.
I would say mixed bag, but that implies there are bad ones. It's incredibly varied in both humor and subject matter. The simplicity of the typical 4 panels creates a nice template. In general, they didn't really use a lot of commas. While I know he experiments heavily with his other long-form work, I don't know any other comic artist who has gone as viral as him multiple times than he has. I guess he's kind of like if Drill posts were drawn, but also if Drill really like Junji Ito on the side.
Oh, that's nice. I mean, I love Drill, to be compared to Drill is great. And obviously, a lot of my sense of humor derives from weird Twitter and jokes like that. The joke is there is a logic to it, but it's more about something, an image that is funny. There's some sort of incongruent image. Another guy who is really good at doing that is, of course, Priest Comics. What's his name? Wizard People, dear reader. But yeah, so thank you. I appreciate I try and mix it up. I do it I do it just because I get bored easy.
To be honest, I never found their comics funny. They're a bit too one-noted.
Yeah, that's fair. I draw a lot of dick jokes. I stopped drawing as many dick jokes because I myself found them to be too one-noted. But yeah, I mean that's the thing. You want attention on the internet. Some people are not gonna find you funny. I used to freak out more when someone made a comment like, House of Decline is not funny. I was like, I guess that's, who cares? I don't.
He's the most consistently funny comic artist out there. He says comics artist, so he might be British. You know how they say like maths?
Comics artist, yeah, maths.
It takes talent to incorporate that many ding-dongs and still make it funny. I also love the comic side of him that gets very dark explorative, like the comic where the man slowly replaces his body with refined parts he made himself. He just gets it. Hope to see more of his work for years to come.
But also, horror and comedy, they're linked because it's like, it's always that sense of surprise. That's what sort of links them, is that moment, that gut punch, where you set everything up, and then that understanding of the gravity of the sort of horrific the horror you were about to endure, whether it is some sort of punishment or whether it is some sort of sight or whether it's some sort of trauma, when that all weighs down on you. Like the moment at the end of The Fly when Gina Davis rips Jeff Goldblum's jaw off and, the real transformation starts and all that setup becomes worth that moment. Or like the famous Junji Ito page turn, when setup, then you get to the page turn and it's the shocking moment. It's the dad with the centipede head, and so it's much like a joke in that way, where it's setup, punchline. And I think that sort of unites them as well, which is why I alternate between them. A lot of horror. Look at Jordan Peele. Look at the fellow what directed Barbarian, the Whitest Kids You Know guy. So I think Tim and Eric's bedtime stories. A lot of stuff there. A lot of stuff between horror and comedy.
Carving out a niche in the way that Alex has is giving him a new lease on life. Starting from voice acting to music to even law school, sometimes it takes a bit of time to find out what you're passionate for. And even with success, it's not always a straight path. And there are many types of accomplishments that can make one whole. Such as mentioned before, just continuing what you do, or even trying your hand at self-publishing. For the life and works of Alex, he has filled the void that many people have been searching for on the Twitter platform. Who knew that all it would take to do so is drawing some funny naked men playing with their own dicks. habits.
Do what you do because you can get better at it. I think that is the motivate. I got traction in online, and I was extremely lucky to get that. But I think the reason why I was doing it was not specifically to get traction, was just because it was filling me with some sort of purpose. And I think whatever led to that sense of purpose led to an inherent positivity in the comics, which is maybe why people like them. But if you can feel yourself getting better at something, that is why you do it. And if you can pour that love of getting better at your skill into what you do, I think people will naturally respond to it.
Well, you House of Declined it in this video. If you loved it, you should like and subscribe, and leave a comment if you haven't already. Maybe check out my animated series, or one of these two videos that are shown on screen. But whatever you do, you can't say here.